Welcome to Bio and Audio, that's the official name, a podcast where we tell the stories of various African American elders as a historical project started by me, Christine. Today, our very first elder will be none other than my grandmother, Doris Gaskins, a licensed and ordained minister, teacher, and preacher. So I wanted to talk to you today to get I guess not biographical, but an autobiographical review of just your life and what you think about everything and everything you've been through and everything you've learned. So I definitely want to start in chronological order. Just if that makes most sense. So I want to start with actually your parents. What can you tell me about your mommy and dad?
Well, I guess you know my father was William Warren Keating. My mother was Mary Ellen Ringo Keating. They were married at a very young age, and I was the third child, but I guess technically I may have been the fourth because there was one that was deceased before I was even born.
Yeah.
So I had two brothers ahead of me, and then there was me. And they had, like I said, they married young. They had an expectation marriage, I'll say. You know, back in the day, if someone became pregnant, there was an expectation that you would marry. You know, so marrying young and starting off with a family was not the best of circumstances. My father was what I call the weekend alcoholic. He only drank on weekends. But the impact of that drinking was felt by the whole family. You know, he would come home on Friday night drunk, for lack of a better word, and kind of wreak havoc in the family. And that lasted until Saturday. And then on Sunday, he spent the day drinking ice water all day in a mayonnaise jar, I guess sobering up. But then he'd go to work Monday through Friday, assuming that it was seasonal time for him to work because he was a laborer on a construction site. He was what they called back then a hard carrier, which means that the walls were of plaster back then. Rather than, you know, the one-piece sheetrock that we have today, plaster walls. So he would carry the plaster materials to be, you know, splattered on the walls. So I guess, you know, maybe lack of education, marrying young, having children. Maybe he found, you know, refuge in drinking on weekends. And that's what he did. My mother got the brunt of it because she was a recipient of his accusations and, you know, things that were said during the week that he would never respond to. He had a response on Friday night or Saturday when the alcohol loosened his tongue and released him, so to speak. My mother, she was a working woman in spite of having 7 children. She worked cleaning other people's houses. I'm not sure what grade she completed, but she was certainly not illiterate. She could read and very smart in her own way. She did the best she could with 7 children. One was an invalid from birth, and the other one was retarded. So she carried the brunt of the family because my father was there as a father figure, but really didn't interact with the, you know, the children so much. So my mother, so there was this estrangement between my mother and father, even though they lived together in the same house. It wasn't a loving family, if you will. But at the same time, I never felt that I was not loved. Perhaps it just wasn't demonstrated. And, you know, and having said that, you know, my children say that I'm not demonstrative either, or at least I wasn't toward them.
Mm-hmm.
and showing my love. But I think I rectified that with my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we had no problem embracing, saying we love each other, that kind of thing. Whereas my children, they said they didn't get that. But I think they understand why, because I was never shown that.
Yeah.
And I never heard my mother or father say they loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is I dreamed about my mother for years, even in recent years. And it was only until maybe a year and a half ago that I dreamt about her. And in the dream, she told me that she loved me.
Ooh.
And that's what I woke up with. Oh my God, my mother told me she loved me. And I have not dreamed about her since.
Wow.
So it was like my psyche was looking for that, because prior to that dream, my other dreams, we were kind of like at odds with one another. But then that dream, it kind of brought it all home. And like I said, I woke up like, oh my God, my mother told me she loved me.
Okay.
So, so she was, she cared a lot. She was a domestic worker, but still she had a household to take care of. She cooked for us. She cleaned. We were very clean. That was like cleanliness is next to godliness. That was kind of like the mantra, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had a rough life in a lot of ways, but she also went to church. She believed in God. And I think that was handed down to me also. And she made sure that we all went to church. My brothers, they didn't think too much of it. But, for me, I loved going to church. And we didn't have a car in the family for so many, but the next door neighbor who had 13 children, they had a car because the husband had a good job, and they pretty much took me to Sunday school.
Wow, with 13 kids.
Yeah. I don't even know how the logistics of how that happened, but I'm sure all their children didn't go either, but they took me on Sunday.
Okay.
And the next door neighbor, Mabel Owens, was my Sunday school teacher.
Oh.
So my parents, they stayed together until the last year of his life. Eventually, when my children came along, obviously they loved their grandchildren. My father really loved them. And on Saturdays, he would come to the house at 830 Lanton Avenue in Baltimore to see them. And he would want to take them to Woolworths back then.
Okay.
And I'd let him, but then there came a time when I said to him, well, you can't take the children if you're drinking.
Okay.
So he went home and accused my mother of turning his grandchildren against him.
Wow.
But immediately he stopped drinking.
Okay, so.
Because it was more important for him to be able to come and take his children to Woolworths than it was for him to drink. So he stopped drinking. And I thought, well, that's going to be just what's needed for this marriage to be what a marriage should be. Well, that never happened because, I didn't understand that, but my mother couldn't forget all the things, that took place while he was drinking. And I kind of didn't understand why she felt that way. Because, I was still young, relatively young. And so eventually things got kind of bad for him to the point where he actually moved out of the house. And when I got wind of it, he was actually sleeping in his car.
Oh. And
of course I told him, no, you're not going to do that. You have to come home with me. And he spent the last year of his life with me. And of course she was not happy about that. And when she saw me on church the Sunday following, when I took him in, she didn't speak to me. But, we took him in anyway. My children adored him. And he was about a year there before he got sick and he died.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Wow.
I still have 2 brothers living, though. Gerald, Uncle Gerald.
Yeah.
Then I have another brother, Larry. He's the one that's retarded.
Yeah.
he's been in a group home most of his life. When my mother died, I kept him for a while, but it was a lot for me because I was working and having children, and he was going to like a daycare facility. So you had to get him on the bus. You had to be home when he got off the bus, you know, that sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually he went to a group home.
Okay.
And he was with the same lady probably for 20 years plus
Okay.
until the last maybe 3 or 4 years. The lady could no longer take care of him because she had 3 other grown men uh, in the same shape. But I think he's 56 now. He was born in 54. I made a note of it somewhere because I had a hard time remembering him. Yeah, he was born on September 30th, 1954.
Okay.
And he's still, he's still living in the group home. I don't really see him that much, but they do contact me whenever he has to have any kind of medical care, dental work, or that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So he's young. He's only a few years older than Kim.
Right, right. So he would be, what, 66?
And
Yeah, she was born in 60 and he was born in 54.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and as a child, he was very much attached to me.
Mm.
Everywhere I went during the summer, he tagged along.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but he didn't really know us, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas one time he would recognize us, but not so much anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, tell me about your childhood and not just the summers, but during the school years too. But yeah, tell me about your childhood.
It's interesting because I am, as Mr. G used to call me, a tortured soul. It seems like I'm never satisfied. I'm not dissatisfied, but I'm always seeking and looking. So the first 3 weeks of COVID-19, I started writing my life story, and I entitled it The Search for Self.
Mm.
And my earliest memory of being me was when I went to school in the first grade.
Okay.
And that was memorable because my brother, Freddie, he beat me up in school.
Oh.
For some reason, tore my blouse off of me. And we were going to a 2-room schoolhouse right across the branch from where we were living. I don't know why he beat me up, as we said, but when he got home, my mother beat him. So
Okay.
that's my recollection of my earliest recollection of real memory. I know things that my aunt and Pooch have told me during my early childhood, but I don't remember them.
Mm-hmm.
Just know a couple of things because they told me.
Right.
But I actually remember this incident when I first went to school. And of course, I went to a 2-room schoolhouse in Lutherville. It was called Colored School. I forget the number, had a number. And then after that, we were bused to Towson Elementary School.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I stayed from the 2nd grade to the 6th grade.
Okay.
And in the 2nd grade, I got the first and only beating, if you will, in school. They could hit you then.
Oh, wow.
And the teacher was Miss Beatrice Brown, and she was one of the 2 teachers in the Lutherville schoolhouse, 2-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
Well, anyway, she was reading. It was reading time, and I decided I didn't want to hear the story. I just laid my head down on my desk, and next thing I knew, there was a yardstick whacking me across the back. So that taught me a lesson right then and there. So that's a memorable thing. Also, during my time at Towson Elementary School, my brother Freddie, the same one who beat me up, he took sick in school, and that's when we found out he had a kidney disease.
Mm-hmm.
And many years later, he ended up being on dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
And So I remember that, but I also remember the good times. I remember in May, we had May Day in school. And we actually had a pole with ribbons, and we wrapped the maypole. You know, there was like a kind of a dance in wrapping the maypole. I really enjoyed that. It was in the 4th grade when I was 9 years old, and we could still have scripture in school, that I learned Psalm 24.
Okay.
And I still know the whole psalm. I may have mentioned some of it during Bible study. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. I mean, I still know that whole psalm from learning it in the 4th grade.
Wow.
So that, and, you know, just the teachers in the school, and the fact that we were bused. There were children who lived in Towson, but we came from Lutherville, Cockeysville, a place called Overley, and as far away as Ricerstown. They were all bused in to the elementary school. Yeah. So, so any friends we had, we only saw them at school. Okay. So then after that, I went to Carver Senior High, which was in Towson. And at that time, that ran from the 7th grade to the 12th grade. Okay. And they were good years there too, except integration came along. So I think going into my 10th grade, we had to go to Towson Senior High because of integration.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that?
It wasn't that bad, really. Okay. I made a couple of good friends, white girls at the time, and one of them was extremely wealthy, and she took to me, and we had a great friendship. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I got pregnant the summer between my 11th and 12th grade. So I only went to 12th grade for maybe a month or so when I knew I had to drop out. But this one girl, Carol, we remained friends even after that. And as Providence would have it, some years later, Skip ended up painting and papering her parents, wallpapering her parents' house.
Oh, okay.
And we kind of, you know, reconnected with that.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, and also during the senior high, I met my first love, David Bishop.
Ooh, tell us about him.
David, he was an excellent basketball player. Okay. And of course, you know, we only saw each other at school.
Right.
I mean, I think there was only one other time or 2 times that I can think of that I really saw him outside of school, you know, but yet I called him my boyfriend. So, you know, and I just cared so much about him. Not only was he a star athlete, but he was a gentleman. Okay. And I understand he died about 2 or 3 years ago. I think he became a Muslim and married and ended up living in Sudan.
Wow.
And I think that's where he died a few years ago. Yeah. So that was pretty much that in school. I loved junior high, the time I spent at Towson Senior High, even though I was only there from the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. I had lots of girlfriends, and we were called the Miss 500s because, you know, we just had it going on like that. It was me and my other girlfriend, whose name was Doris, and my other girlfriend, her name was Doris.
Okay.
We're still friends until this day, but I don't really see them that much. They're all still living. Neither one of them ever learned how to drive, never got their license.
Oh, wow.
And so our paths just kind of, you know, veered off into different directions. But nonetheless, they were good days. And I had lots of boyfriends during those days.
Ooh.
That I only saw at school.
Okay.
Andrew Amos and William Selby. He ended up going into the Army at one time, but he continued to write me. And at one time, I had a whole box of letters around here somewhere. And, you know, your mother and aunt, they pull them out every now and then and just read them and get a good laugh. They write me all kinds of letters. And this one boy rode the bus with me. And he asked, could he sit with me the other day? Now, I'm very poor, didn't have any money. That's another story. I had to have public transportation, which was a dime. And a lot of times I didn't have a dime to catch the bus. But a friend of mine, her mother worked at a place called College Manor in Lutherville,
Okay.
which was on the way to school. And I really depended on her to come by and give me a ride to school.
Gotcha.
And most mornings that happened, except one morning that I can remember that it didn't. And I don't know where I got the dime or what, but I don't think I walked to school. So it was a lot going on, you know, during that time. But getting back to this one boy who wanted to sit with me on the bus, and he said, if you allow me to sit with you on the bus on the way home, I'll buy you ice cream every day. Because after school, you could buy ice cream.
Okay.
And so he brought me ice cream. M. Jackson, I won't say his first name. So I had ice cream every day. And not only that, my homeroom teacher in the 9th grade, Gloria McDaniels, I'll never forget her, she kind of took a liking to me. And at the beginning of the 9th grade, she said, now, Doris, if you continue to be a nice girl, I'm going to buy you lunch every day.
Ooh.
And she did.
Wow.
Gloria McDaniels. And that taught me how to be a giver, to share. So lots of experiences, a lot of good times. And plus we had teen center, you know, Saturday nights in the school auditorium, we had teen center. We went dancing, and then we'd walk 3 or 4 miles, I guess it was, up to a place called Mr. Len's. It was like a delicatessen run by 2 black men up in Towson, across from Towson Elementary. And that was the to-go place, or the go-to place after teen center.
Wow.
The only problem was that Skip's old girlfriend wasn't ready to let him go. And one Saturday night I walked in there and all her girlfriends were lined up waiting for me, but nothing happened. But I see that look on your face, Christine.
Yeah. Waiting for you for what?
So that was, had a lot of good times, a lot of fun times, in spite of being quote unquote poor. My mother worked for people and brought a lot of nice clothes home to me. And there was a place in Towson, a used clothes place called The Shopper.
Okay.
So a lot of my clothes came from there, but they were on consignment from rich people, you know, well, people who were more well off than we were.
Okay.
I always looked decent.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing that I didn't like during my high school days was because my mother had to work, and she had an invalid child and one that was retarded. We had to rotate staying home to babysit. So I usually missed a day out of school each week, babysitting. And I did not like that at all. I absolutely loved school, but I had to miss so much time just to babysit. But that instilled in me the fact that I would never have so many children that my other children would have to take care of them and miss school. I would not allow that to happen. And my father's drinking made me tell myself I would never marry a man that drank. And I didn't. Yeah. So, you know, lessons learned from those childhood experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Was there like I know you talked about teen center on Saturdays. Was there anything like a prom at the end of the year?
Well, in my senior year, I would have gone to a prom. Okay. But I was pregnant. Okay. And that's the only night I cried because I had to drop out of school, was prom night.
Oh, okay.
You know, but because I was pregnant, and of course I had Kim in May, so you know, so that was the only time I cried.
Okay. So after you had Kim, and you unfortunately had to leave high school, what did you do?
Well, I got married.
Okay.
I got married in February of 1960. I got married and because I had Kim. And then 1 year later, I had Kathy. And 3 years later, I had Chris. And 3 years after that, I had Kia.
Okay.
So that finished off the team.
Mm-hmm.
And but during that time, when I had Kim, Kathy, and Chris, I guess it was, I did some domestic work. Well, even when I was in high school, in the evenings, I did domestic work. I'd go to people's houses and clean up a couple of hours. And then when I dropped out of school, I did more ironing. I took in ironing. People brought their clothes to me to be ironed.
Okay.
So I did that, and I was able to stay home, with the children, but I ironed all day,
Yeah.
you know. And so till this day, I don't do any ironing. Because one time I asked my mother what was my gift, and she said ironing. I'm like, ironing? I don't want that to be a gift. I'm talking about spiritual gift. But anyway, so I did a lot of ironing, and then my friend Doris I was telling you about, she had gotten a job at Blue Cross, and she told me about the opportunities there. But prior to that, I had gone to work in a wire factory in
Wow.
Cockeysville. So we were welding baskets, the wire baskets you see in offices that you put.
Yeah.
Well, we would wire those. And I tell you, my hands were horrible looking because little pieces of the wire would get in your fingers, and sometimes the wire would be dry, and it would pop, when you welded it. And not only that, there was one lady who had been there for years, an older lady, and she was a whiz kid, and you got paid by the pieces that you did. And she really didn't relish somebody else coming in, doing some of the work, which would cut down on her piecework. And so she was not nice. But I didn't stay there that long.
Okay.
But in addition to working there, I was also working in the evening at a cleaners at York Road on Towson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But then I worked at Van Poos. Van Poos got me that job.
Okay.
Skip took good care of the children, though, whenever I was working. And so then I heard about Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And so I went there and applied and got hired.
Cool.
And I started out as a file clerk, making $58.50 a week.
Wow.
And when I left there in 1992 or 93, I'm not sure, I was making $70,000. So I went from a file clerk to what they call the coder, to a claims examiner, to a supervisor, to a manager, to a project manager.
Okay.
So Blue Cross was good to me. 28 years.
That's across from Towson, right?
It's right on Joppa Road. It has the big red cube out front.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but we started out down by Towson State University.
Okay.
There was a pharmacy there and a little deli, and we had the upper floors. So we went from there to Joppa Road, the big glass building, and then we had offices in Delaney, across from Towson Town Mall. I worked there. Then we had offices in Timonium. I worked there.
Okay.
And then I ended up in Owens Mills. I worked there. Only, I think, to come back to Joppa Road eventually when I became a project manager.
Okay.
And that's where I eventually retired from that after 28 years because the position ended.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was that for Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
So you talked about how you had to leave school because you were pregnant. So when did you go back to school and then go on to then get your bachelor's and master's and all?
Well, what I did, I took the GED.
Okay.
And I tell you, it was the hardest test that I've ever taken in my life.
I've heard that before.
And it was interesting. I was talking to other people who were taking it, who said that they had taken a prep class at the community college to prepare them for the GED, and they felt like no way would they pass that test.
Wow.
So I ended up passing it first time, and I remember just going home being totally mentally drained. Because it's a 5-part test, math and English and science, and I forget the other part, but you had to write. I mean, it was just hard.
Wow.
But so then I did that, and this was while I was working at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And then I think at the age of 49, I decided that I would go to college. And I took, I think I took one class at CCB in Baltimore, and I took one class at Morgan, and then I went to Notre Dame.
Okay.
And that's where I got my liberal arts degree, undergrad in Notre Dame. And then from there, I went to St. Mary's Seminary and Ecumenical Institute, and that's where I got my master's.
Okay. Was that where you graduated from in 2015? No, 13.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. Yes, it was 2013.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to remember what year you graduated because I know we all went.
Right. Yep. 2013. Wow. Yeah. Remember Omar Epps was there?
Yes, because his mom graduated with you, right?
Yeah, she graduated with me. Yeah.
And I remember on the program they separated y'all by gender. Like it was by what people had studied, but I remember they separated y'all by gender. I do remember that.
Why I didn't even notice that. I'll have to look at that. Yeah.
In the program, I'm like, so what's different about their degrees? Because they're women.
I'm trying to think. Because I think we also had some of the priests who were graduating. See, St. Mary's had a seminary, and that's for the priests in training or in school. And then they have what they call the Ecumenical Institute, which means non-denominational, where anybody could go to the institute. Okay. So I'm not sure if that separation may have been the priests and all of the people from the Ecumenical Institute. Maybe we were all women in that class. I don't remember. I'll have to check that out.
Okay.
That may have been it.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to pivot to a little bit of your love life.
Oh, wow. Well, like I said, most of my boyfriends, I only saw them in school.
Okay.
And, and they write all the crazy letters. And so then, I don't know how I got hooked up with Skippy, your grandfather. But it was the summer of 1959. Wow. I guess he probably stalked me or whatever.
Ooh.
And I was young. I was only 16.
Yeah.
And he was probably 21.
Okay.
So he probably took advantage of me, really.
Okay.
But anyway, I ended up getting pregnant. That was my first time I had sex with anybody with him.
Oh, wow.
And G was the second person I had sex with.
Oh,
now, some of my kids, when we talk, they say, "You crazy? Only 2 men, variety, the spice of life, and all that." I'm like, "Well, y'all just go ahead. Y'all live your own life."
I'm happy with it.
Yeah,
don't exactly. Listen to them. Hell no.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, Skip and I, we were married for 35 years. Mm-hmm. And he just did that midlife crisis thing and just got crazy. Mm-hmm. And I was fine. I thought the marriage was fine, but it is what it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe 5 years later, G called me and asked me, was I allowed to take phone calls? And I'm like,
allowed?
Am I allowed to take phone calls? I'm 50 years old or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't give him my number.
Oh, okay.
But
How
he
did
ended
he
up,
get it?
girl, he ended up calling me anyway. And we probably talked on the phone 3 or 4 months before we actually kind of dated, if you will.
Oh,
Because, he was going through with his wife. And I'm like, nah, I can't talk to you. So eventually he had moved out from her.
okay.
And, so then eventually, I guess we dated, a couple years or so. And then he, asked me to marry him. And he said, and the thing was, he said, I want to make sure that you're taken care of after I'm gone.
Hmm.
And which I laugh at today because he was cheap as hell during the marriage.
Mr. G was cheap. He was sweet though. He was so
He
sweet.
was. I mean, but cheap in the sense he didn't just throw money at me,
Yeah.
But I'd come home from work and there'd be a newspaper or whatever, and with something at the Meyerhoff or a play somewhere or whatever. You think you'd like this? He said, and I'm like, yeah. And from there, he just took it. I never had to make reservations. I never had to pay or do anything. It was always, you want to do this? He took care of everything. So I
Oh,
appreciate that. And he introduced me to, the Meyerhoff and a different kind of music. I still never got with his jazz. He loved jazz. But we used to follow this group called the Three Mo Tenors. They were black tenors, and I
hmm.
loved them. And we went to some plays and things. So, from that perspective, he was good. And
Okay.
true to his word, because of him, I get a check every month. One of
Okay.
my checks every month is because of him. So he was true to his word in that respect, that he
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I was taken care of.
Yeah. I love Mr. G. I remember when we
Yeah.
lived there and he would be in his office, and when he was ready to go upstairs for the night, he would come over and rub you on the head. He always said something nice. He was
Uh-huh.
never mean, never
Mm-mm.
nasty,
No.
nothing.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Yeah.
Loved to talk,
Yes.
and kept his office full of potato chips and sugar cookies and things
Ginger
like that.
snaps and all that.
Right, right. Yeah, he was a good person. He
Yeah.
was a good person.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. So
Mm.
that's about it. Them two was it. I've been praying, but ain't nobody. God ain't sent nobody, so I don't know.
Well,
But I'm certainly open to a companion.
okay. Are you open to marriage or just
I'm not sure about marriage.
okay? Okay.
No, because at my age, and I'm very, I'm settled in my ways, and not only that, also thinking about age, I'm subject to illnesses, as I get older, and I think about if you're into a new marriage and you don't have a history, and then wanting somebody to take care of you, I think about all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
But you're open to companionship and fun.
I am open to companionship, and I would not say never ever marriage,
Okay.
because you just don't know.
Yeah.
People older than I am get married,
Yeah.
But right now, just some companionship, just for some male conversation.
Yeah.
Men have a different perspective on things, and just to talk.
Okay.
So.
All right. So let's talk about you raising your four crazy children.
Oh my God, yeah, I don't
How was
know.
that?
You know what? It was easy.
Okay.
I was young. By the time I was 25, I had all four of my children.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I was young. Skip was very helpful. When I worked at Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I used to work overtime until 7 o'clock. And when I came home, they were always fed and bathed, and he combed their hair and did everything. So he made it easy.
Oh
And
wow.
he was the disciplinarian. And, he had no problems cleaning the house or even ironing my clothes if need be. Whatever needed to be done, he did. So he made it easy. And because I was young, I had energy. So my biggest hurdle was all the laundry.
Mm.
Because at the time we lived in Lutherville, we lived at 609 Seminary Avenue until Kia was a year old, I think.
Okay.
And we didn't have wash and dryer. So once a week, taking all those clothes to the laundromat.
Yeah.
That was the thing. But once I got into my own house and had my own wash and dryer, then, laundry wasn't a problem. But I just never saw it being hard. I was young, so we had a lot of fun. We went somewhere every weekend.
Okay.
One couple of summers, we went to Atlantic City every weekend because we had about 4 other couples, and we would caravan and go to Atlantic City. At that time, they had a boardwalk. They had a lot of games for rides for children. So we'd go all over the place to the beach and wherever. Every weekend, we were on the go.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I said, we had friends that we would visit or they would visit us.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I never thought of it as a burden or sacrifice or anything. It was easy raising them. Now I didn't know how they turned out. I ain't gonna say much about
that everything after that is on him.
Exactly. Yeah, they were a joy, and I always wanted girls.
Okay.
So I got girls. I mean, I had to go through some pain to get them, but still, no. Like I said, I found it relatively easy raising them.
Well, that's good.
I mean, they used to do crazy things. Like I would tell them, "Don't call me." They got older and could babysit themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call me if it's not necessary. And
Yeah.
I remember one time I had a secretary. Most of my years at Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and they knew Miss Diane, and she loved them like they were her children. And so this one particular day, I was in a meeting, and they called Diane and said they needed to talk to me. And so Diane said, "Is it important?" And they said, "Yes." Okay. So she gets me out of the meeting, and I answered the phone. "Can we take our bikes out?"
Oh,
so I was about ready to kill them. Okay.
They just wanted to agitate you.
So, but otherwise, Kathy was always Kathy. She was always willing to do what she wanted to do and suffer the consequences. She cut her hair from all around.
Oh my God.
She used to like to go out in the night, and so one time she wanted to go out on a Saturday night, probably a club or someplace, I don't know. And so she asked her father for the car, and he said no. Next thing I know, bonk, bonk, bonk. Here's this white guy that she went to school in front of the house in his pickup truck. She had called him to come get her, to take her where she wanted to go.
Oh my God.
And then she'd come home at night taking the last bus from Baltimore out to Parkville. And she'd have to walk about a mile through some apartments to get home.
Right. This is at Throgmorton, right?
Yes. And then when I talked to her about it, she pulled out this little knife and how nobody's going to bother me. She had a little knife.
Well, I bet you nobody did. Shoot.
But early on, when I registered Kim for school, Lutherville Elementary, and they went to tell me that they thought I should keep her home another year. And I'm like, why? I'm not a teacher.
Yeah.
She's coming. And then when she got to high school, I guess during her last year, her counselor had the nerve to say he didn't think she was college material.
Wow.
Okay, well now she's the IEP coordinator for Baltimore City, making about $98,000 a year. Okay.
Exactly. Clearly.
Yeah. So now your mother, Chris, I had to go to school for her once in elementary school. She was doing something. But then we also learned that, I think it was Kathy and Chris, they were supposed to walk to school, to Leaf Walk, because we lived on Lenton Avenue at that time. And come to find out, they were taking bus passes from children. And the way they got found in, one of my cousins, David Brown, was the transit bus driver.
Oh.
And he knew they shouldn't be riding the bus. So they got told on.
Oh.
So then Kia, I'm trying to think, did Chris get in the fight at Mercy? But Kia got in trouble because she was given some spelling words, and she used all of them in a negative way in a sentence. You know, do your words in a sentence. So I got called in.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think when she got in the fight or what, how I happened to be there. So I'll never forget the nun. I'm sitting there talking there, and as she talks about whatever I went there for, she pulls out this paper and says, "Now look at this." And it was Kia's sentences that she had written with all these negative connotations. So anyway.
So they weren't that bad.
No, they really weren't. No, I mean, they weren't rebellious or sassy or, they just didn't give us any trouble. They didn't even mind going to church because at that time, New Charlotte had a lot of youth.
Oh,
and they had this group called Youth Express,
okay.
where Miss Pat, she was the facilitator, and they could go in there and talk and tell her everything and anything, and she would never tell their parents anything. Oh. And until this day, they still, congregate at Pat's house for every and anything.
Yeah.
So they loved going to New Charlotte. So they weren't too keen on going back for 6 o'clock service, but at the time they weren't there anyway. They sneak off to Druid Hill Park,
Oh my gosh. How did they sneak off all the way to Druid Hill Park?
Well, what I found out, and this wasn't at 6 o'clock, but at 11 o'clock, they had this one gentleman there, real sharp gentleman. He worked in a shoe store in Ricestown Road Plaza. Okay. I don't know how Kathy and them befriended him, but I think it was him and another man. They offered to park their cars for them on Sunday because at that time we were at Fremont and Landville, and it didn't have a parking lot, so they were offered to park their cars. Mm-hmm. Of course, they had the keys, and one of them I know for sure he knew they weren't coming to church; they were taking the car. Ooh. And he just said to one of them, "It seems like I never have any gas when y'all bring my car back," and he gave him money for gas.
Take his car.
So, yeah.
That is funny. How did you start going to New Charlotte?
Because of my brother. One of the things he liked was listening to preachers on radio. On the radio. So one night, and he'd be always moving the dial and that kind of thing. And my mother heard Reverend Carter preaching on the radio. He used to come on WBAL 9 o'clock on Sunday nights. And she heard him, and she went to New Charlotte. And then she told me about it. And that's how I got there.
Oh.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. So speaking of New Charlotte and just church in general and even broader religion, how did you choose or it probably was a calling, but how did you choose your path into the church and into your preaching and all?
Well, when I got to New Charlotte, of course, I didn't know anybody, but Reverend Carter Sr., who was the pastor at the time, he seemed to have this gift of discernment, knowing what people's gifts were, even though they didn't know them. And he had asked a woman, she's deceased now, what was my name? And one Sunday, as he was coming up those back steps going to the pulpit, for some reason I was going down, and he said, "How are you, Miss Taylor?" And I was shocked that he knew my name. Mm-hmm. And, but I didn't think anything of it. And then eventually, I think he said something to somebody about me teaching in the Saturday church school. Mm. And then he formed this group of 100 people. He walked through the congregation and picked out 100 people that he wanted to be in this group called the Stewards of Christ. Mm. And he said, "And Miss Taylor, you're going to be the leader." Well, I almost died. I remember going home and saying to my family, I'm like, who is he to think that I can be a leader of 100 people,
Yeah.
And so that's how I got started. We had monthly meetings, and we had books to read, and I would facilitate the book report, so to speak, on at each meeting, and I was the lay leader. And then from there, from the other group of 100, a lot of them went on to be preachers and deacons and other fields of ministry. But from that group, he then called me to be a deacon.
Okay.
And I was there a short time when I knew the call was on my life. And I woke up preaching, and but then when I went to check out the scripture that I was preaching from, well, this book doesn't have this many chapters in it, so you can't be calling me. And then one Sunday I was at church, and for some reason I stayed in the sanctuary, Fremont Landville. Everybody had gone. And I sat down on a chair at the end of the pew, and I just didn't feel anything that Sunday. And I just said to God, please don't take your Holy Spirit from me. And the voice I heard was, well, then preach my word. And at the time, I didn't want to preach because Skip had been called into ministry. And I knew, academically speaking, he was on a different level from me.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be in competition with him. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm telling God, no, I'm not going to do that. And so then he seemed to say to me, well, okay, you're going to use him as an excuse. Let me uncover him. And that's when I found out that he was running with all these women and that sort of thing. But I still didn't yield. And then the church sent us to Atlanta to a conference. And I drove along with a lady named Kathleen Bowen. Okay. And we got there.
What year was it?
It must have been 92.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I got there, I think the last session was on a Friday. And I went to an early morning session, and it was about prayer. And now I got it written down somewhere, but I forget what it actually was. But for lunch, we had the mayor of Atlanta speaking. And I forget his name now, but anyway, he says, I come from a long line of preachers, but I'm not going to preach. And I'm sitting at a table with 9 other people, and I had a little red Bible. And as he said that, the next thing I knew, my red Bible was in my hand, and it was open to the 4th chapter of the book of John. And I could basically see my initial sermon on those pages. And I said to Kathleen, who rode with me, I said, we got to leave early in the morning. I said, I've got to get back to Baltimore. I didn't tell her what it was for. But in my mind, I knew I had to get back to Baltimore and do what I dreaded doing, go in and tell Reverend Carter that I was called to preach. And so I made an appointment to go in to see him, and I sit down and told him. He said, oh, yeah, I knew what you wanted. Like, what do I tell me?
Right, exactly.
So that's how it was. And of course, Skip was into his mess at the time and not that supportive of the fact. And then I remember getting my letter giving me my date for my initial sermon. And I'm all excited, and he was just like a lead balloon on it, And I felt down about it, but I didn't let it get to me. And of course, he was there when I did my initial sermon. And then, after that, I just kept on doing what I was doing. I used to teach Saturday church school, speaking in the mornings. At that time, we still had 6 a.m. prayer service. But at that time, when we were assigned to preach, we had to preach 7 days in a row.
Oh.
So that meant we had to get 7 messages together. And can I tell you, each time we were on a rotating basis, each time it was my time to preach, Skip would pick that time to leave and go and live with her.
Mm.
And here I am, struggling with trying to get 7 messages and dealing with, what was going on there. And finally, after 3 years of just praying about it, I'm like, I got to put an end to this
Yeah.
because, he'd come back and he'd leave. And, he said, I really, I'm going to give her up. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and blah, all these Academy Award speeches and didn't mean anything. And at that time, he stopped bringing money in the house. And then I found out he won $15,000 at the racetrack, didn't give me a dime.
No.
And that really hit home because he was always so generous with his money with me,
Yeah.
Any Saturday, I'd go home from Saturday church school and look under my jewelry box, and he would have left me $100, $200, and
Yeah.
so things like that. It just got to be so much that I decided, I've got to end this.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't happy, and he didn't want a divorce, but he told me he didn't want to be married to me either. And I'm like, well, what's in between? You running the streets and me sitting home?
Right.
And finally, I just made that decision.
Good for you.
Yeah. Enough wasn't enough. It was too much.
Yeah.
So, and then, eventually I started the church, and I just felt like, I had to get rid of him because he couldn't go where God was going to take me.
Yeah. That's fair. You can't take everybody with you. Sometimes people include
Exactly.
yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to talk to you about was what's going on today with all the protests and the Black community's different reactions to police brutality, and also kind of trying to relate it back to the civil rights movement, and things that happened in really every time before now, 50s, 60s, even 40s. So
the difference between the civil rights movement and now, for the most part, it was confined to the South, as far as the marches and things like that. So we didn't really have that up close and in our face with that. We saw it on TV, we knew of Dr. King and all that. But growing up, although I never had any problem, well, I lived on Railroad Avenue, and everybody on Railroad Avenue were Black, except at the way far end there was a white family. But nobody bothered us. And I guess because we seemed to know our place, so to speak. But I was never called a nigger or anything like that, for living in Lutherville. And so I wasn't aware of any blatant racism.
Okay.
The first time that my race was a problem for me was when I went to Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Wow.
I understand that the manager, I was the first Black person to work in my department. And I was told that he had gotten everybody together and told them that I was coming and I was Black, or whatever the term was back then. And he didn't anticipate any problems. And, but I did hear one person that I know, her name was June, who said, well, she wasn't going to eat lunch with no Black person. Well, I ain't like her no way when I met her, but, so I didn't, I didn't have that problem. Like I said, I started out as a file clerk and I made my way up, I knew that in the workplace, it was one thing, they had to work with me because I knew my operations, and they'd call me in to troubleshoot operations that weren't doing well. So, we got along with, good co-workers and all that. But then sometimes at lunch, when I was at Delaney Center across from Towson Mall, when I go across the mall to lunch, well, it was another story. Like, some of them didn't know me, But as far as in the workplace, I didn't experience that. not only was I the first Black in my department, I was the first Black supervisor in the company and the first Black manager.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
would have expected you to, well, not expected, I guess assume for you to have to deal with a little more of that. Not to
I,
say that
I
times
really
different.
did.
Okay.
Because, one thing, I knew how to act. It wasn't an act. I mean, I just knew how to carry myself. They always talked about how well I dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Now a couple of little Jew boys, they'd make comments, especially when I got my BMW. Now that was the talk of Blue Cross. Oh my God. So much so that one day an outside auditor came into my office. And when he sat down, the first thing he said was, "I hear you have a BMW." So after the meeting, I went over to my boss and I said, "Jim, I have a favor to ask you." And I said, "I know you can do this, but I need you to get the word out that I need the people to stop talking about my BMW. I spend my money the way I want to spend it, and everybody else spends their money the way they want to." We
Yep.
had these two Jew guys, Alan and I forget the other. We loved them. We had a lot of fun with them, but they were Jew guys. And I'd be sitting at a meeting, and one of them said, Gucci watch. Stuff like that. And I'm like, "Alan Mayer, you might want to save all your money, but I'm going to spend mine." So we had that kind of back and forth, but nothing real serious.
Okay.
But when I traveled, usually I would be the only Black person. I never did happy hour with them. Because I know when white folk drink.
Yeah.
And I mean, and one place we went, they even ordered liquor beforehand to take with us. I forgot where we were going. I think it must have been Springfield, Virginia. But they would come around taking orders for liquor. I'm like, I don't even drink. So that whole week, I had room service. I ate dinner in my room every evening. I was not going to be worried with them. And then one time we were in Atlanta, and the hospitality room was up on the 49th floor at Peachtree Plaza, and you had to take the outside elevator to get to that. So I didn't make that one. But I can only recall once when I actually had dinner with them. I just didn't mingle with them because, I know how loose lips can be when you drink the alcohol.
Yeah.
And so, but they respected the fact that I didn't drink and all that, so it wasn't an issue.
Well, that's good. So you seem to have had a mellow life, if that's the
I
term.
think so. So with the protests and all that are going on now, I think they're needful. And the downside of that, you have the outsiders coming in, like the white supremacists.
Yeah.
And all those others taking advantage of it and doing the setting on fires and the looting. It's not to say that some Blacks aren't doing that, but they get blamed for all of it. So that's problematic. But I was happy to see so many races involved in it for such a long period of time. And it wasn't limited just to this country. Germany and Japan and other countries were on board with us.
Yeah.
So I think it has, and it is bringing about change.
Yeah.
We still have that problem of police brutality. It looks like they kind of increased a little bit in retaliation.
Yeah.
And so many of them have resigned. I'm like, good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yeah. I agree.
But it's still white privilege. When they took into custody the young man that killed those people at the Bible study, they took him to Burger King. Stuff like that. And they very seldom shoot to kill a white person.
Yeah.
No matter what they've done. But Black people, we end up dead, and you don't have to have done anything. I'm leery. I don't even want. I don't know. If I broke down on the road or something like that, I would not call the police.
Me neither. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would call my dad, probably.
Yeah, somebody, anybody, because you don't know where you're going to end up, dead or alive, and they escalate situations.
Yeah.
They're not good. They're just
And
not good.
and that's so interesting you said that they escalated because what they're supposed to do is
Right.
de-escalate it.
Exactly. Yeah. Thinking back, there was one incident when I had Kim. Um, we had a health clinic in Towson. I lived in Lutherville, so it was free. So I would take her to the clinic. That was before I got a private pediatrician
Mm-hmm.
to get her shot. So this one day, I'm in Towson walking toward the clinic, and on the other side of the street, there are a group of white officers, not a whole lot of them, but one of them said, "Oh, there goes your wife over there," pointing to another. So I just ignored it. You know,
Wow.
yeah. But otherwise,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I worry about you all, Carrie, Black people in general.
Yeah.
I had a pregnant Black woman on the ground, sitting on
Yeah.
her belly, just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I've seen a video where at a protest, I've seen a couple videos like this where the police officers will be in their trucks and they'll just ram through crowds of protesters.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, what is the purpose? But that goes back to what I was saying the other day in Bible study. The cruelty is the point.
Right.
There's no
Right.
reason that you're doing. There's no reason why you had to do that.
But
Absolutely
even more
nothing.
important than that, there's no consequence.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
it's like Trump. I do what I want.
Yeah.
So it's sad. It's a sad time.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that this is the storm before the calm. That these things have gotten worse and then they're going to get better.
Yeah.
But with this coronavirus and Dr. Fauci, you know, projecting that we may see 100,000 cases a day if
Yeah.
we don't get our hands around this thing, And then you have a president who's doing nothing, no leadership at the top, but I don't depend on him anyway for anything.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as a people, and even with starting with the family, we have got to. That's why we have to be close knit. We've got to help each other out. We've got to be there for each other because you can't depend on other people to do it.
Yeah. I agree.
You just can't.
How do you feel about just the virus and its effects on life now?
Well, it's something to get used to. I mean,
Mhm.
I had maybe 2 or 3 days since March where I just felt like, oh my gosh, it's too much, to be at 77, to have lived a certain kind of lifestyle, and now all of a sudden you're confined and you can't go this place and you can't go that place. But
Mhm.
at the same time, though, my health is more important than any place that I would want to go.
Yep.
You know, so I'm fine with it now. I'm working. I'm back to work a couple of days a week for a couple of hours.
Okay.
It's only like 4 of us in the office.
Okay.
So, and my back is to all 4 of them. The
Okay.
other 4. So, and I'm just working to pay off some bills. And once I pay off them bills, I'm not going to work. I'm tired. I really am.
Yeah.
And but I made these. They are credit card bills, and I got to pay them.
Yeah.
But once that's done, I'm done with work.
Okay.
Although initially I enjoyed it because it got me up and
Mhm.
bathed and dressed and out of the house. But now I'm at the point now where I really want to not work, and I want to really spend more time studying the Bible. I want to be a better teacher. I want to, and hopefully in some ways that will make me useful
Mm.
to people that I meet or come in contact with. Because I don't know of anything other than God and the Word of God that's going to get us through this stuff.
Yeah.
That's where the hope is. And, that's what I said. You go back and read that Old Testament, it was war all the time,
Yeah.
And, but like I told many people, the thing that I felt the Spirit speak to me back in October was that God was going to deal with Donald Trump in a way that we could never imagine, but there would be collateral damage.
Mm.
And I think we're seeing that. And I also felt around about the same time that women were going to become more prominent
Mm.
and leadership and that sort of thing. And I think, well, but women, we have to be prepared,
Yeah.
to step in whatever capacity God sees fit to place us in.
Yeah. Okay.
My main concern about the virus is the children not being able to go into school, because who's it going to hurt? Urban children
The most. Yep.
the most. And who are they for the most part? Black
Black.
children.
Yep.
So that's a real concern. That's like little Kathy. She's supposed to teach Tuesdays and Thursdays when school was open,
Mm-hmm.
and the children in her class were to come on remotely. Well, most of the time they didn't show up.
Mm.
And they had computers. At least they were given computers. But you don't know what kind of household they're living in. Them computers may have been sold for drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
Or the parents just didn't think it was important to make sure that the children were online to get the lesson.
Wow.
So it's just so many facets of this thing. But the bottom line is that urban children are going to be hurt the most. So here you have the third grade pipeline again leading to prison.
Yep. Which I feel like is probably part of the reason for such inaction. I know it has to do with money too, because they want everything open back up.
Yeah.
But that's still money because they need more
It
people
is.
to be
I
in
mean,
prison so they can get free labor.
Trump knew about this thing. He did not jump on it. He could have given a national mandate.
Yep.
Instead of saying it was a hoax.
Yep.
She's now saying these Russian allegations are a hoax also.
Mm-hmm.
He did nothing for 6 weeks. And then, relegated everything to the states, didn't give the states what they needed as far as, ventilators and equipment, lied and say Obama didn't leave him with any ventilators. Come to find out, he was left with 6,600 ventilators. And they didn't even dispense them.
Yeah.
All because he didn't want it to look like it was a problem and have a negative impact on his chance for re-election. Well, guess what, bro? You can forget about re-election, I think.
Yeah.
With this way this thing has gone, and now these Russian allegations about our military, we send them over to fight a war and somebody pays to have them killed. And now he said that's a hoax. It's not a hoax. He's in bed with Putin.
Yep.
That's scary. Now that's more scary than anything, because it threatens our democracy.
Yeah.
It might not be perfect, but it's a whole lot better than what other countries have. I mean, Trump wants to be a dictator.
Yes.
And I don't want to live under a dictator of no kind. And that's the scary part of this whole thing for me.
Yeah.
What's it doing to the country? And, so much violence is just a response to fear. The fear that people have, they don't know how to express it any other way but their violence. Not to make excuses for them, but I think that's a reality.
So I do have a couple more questions.
Okay. And if I'm talking too much, tell me.
Oh, girl, please. No. So, I remember I want to say I was in the ninth grade, and you, I think, had just gotten the diagnosis that you had breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
How was it dealing with that?
It was, first of all, it was God that made me know it,
Mm,
because I hadn't had my mammogram in 2 years.
mm,
And one day at work, I was setting up the room for a party for a coworker who was leaving.
mm-hmm,
And as I'm setting up the table, had to be spirit that says, you need to get your mammogram.
mm,
And after I finished setting up, I went upstairs to my office and I called and made the appointment.
mm-hmm,
I went to my appointment, they took the mammogram, and they called me back and showed it to me. And there was a little dot on the mammogram with a little tail heading back toward my armpit.
mm,
And they said, you need to have it biopsy. Prior to that, I had, I think, 4 surgeries on my right breast for cysts, uh, suspicious mammogram, whatever, and everything had been benign. So with this one, with the right breast, I'm like, okay, this is probably, benign too. So when I went and had the biopsy done, and then I remember getting a call at work, and they told me that it was malignant. And I didn't really fall apart.
okay.
I was concerned, and I never thought I was going to die from it. I
Mm,
never thought that. Um, so then I went and had the surgery to remove the lump and to check my lymph nodes. And it came back that it had gone to some of my lymph nodes.
mm,
Even then, I still never thought about death. Uh, when I started doing chemo, that was the worst thing in life. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I
mm,
mean, chemo just rendered you completely weak, that you can't even lift your head up off the pillow. No appetite. I lost like 20 pounds, and so much so to the point that at one point I had made my mind I wasn't going to take any more chemo.
mm,
And I told Kim and I told G. G went with me to every appointment. And so when I made this decision, G went with me as usual, and then Kim went with me also. They
mm.
were going to be my support system for telling my oncologist that I was not going to do any more chemo.
Okay.
And I sat there in my little weak voice, and I had it all written down on yellow paper, and told him all the reasons why I was not going to take any more chemo. I said, I'm not afraid to die. It's well with my soul. And he listened to me. Then he got up in my face and he said, yes, you will. You will take this chemo. He said, because I told you that if we don't get it now, if it comes back, I can treat it, but I can't cure it. Those 2 support persons on the, that's right, Dr. Marquand, you tell her. I looked at them too, and looks could kill. They both would have fallen dead in that doctor's office. So that was an experience. Like I said, just no absolute. When I said no energy, and of course, I went bald, lost all my hair,
Yeah.
and that bothered me at first. I mean, I cried for 30 seconds. And I looked in the mirror, and all I could see was my brother Gerald looking back at me. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my God.
y'all look like twins.
But then I got over that. And then, it was the 6 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week.
Wow.
And that was, the radiation itself wasn't painful, but I had to lay like this.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, you lose the circulation in your arms. Because blood doesn't go up like that. And
Yeah.
that hurt so bad, I cry.
Wow.
And then after a couple of visits, I said, I'm not going to cry anymore. I'm going to pray my way through the pain. And that's what I did. I started praying for other people that I had met who were going through chemo and radiation. Took my mind off my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then toward the end, my last week, just when I was just about finished, the radiation had burned me so badly that I had to stop for a week. Because, you know, you could just lift up my breast and rub my hand, of course, the skin would just fall off, you know.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I had to stop for a week and then finish my last week out. So that was, you know, they had said, you think this chemo is something, radiation ain't no walk in the park. But to me, comparatively speaking, radiation was a walk in the park compared to chemo.
Wow.
You just had to go for what, 6 or 7 weeks every day. And then they had this big machine that, you know, come down, goes across you, and yeah, just. And then
Wow.
they took a mole of your neck that you would lay in each time you went, and you know they'd mark you up for the radiation. And this big red light across you. You know the machinery and you know changing the positions and just you know
It
just
was
all that.
intimidating.
No, it wasn't. The nurses and all, and they were just delightful. Matter of fact, when I was going through radiation, when I started crying, it was the male nurse. And he was so, you know, sorry and upset that I was crying. And he was a visiting nurse. You know, you have nurses who travel the country
Mm-hmm.
when they're needed, but he was so sympathetic and kind. And even when I took chemo, you know, they set me down and explained everything and told me that, you know, I could have reactions or something like that, but there was no reaction that I would have that they weren't equipped to take care of. The last chemo, I took 3 kinds of chemo. The last one I took was called Taxotere.
Mm-hmm.
And they had given me a pamphlet to read. And I tell you, I read it before I started it. When I got there, I was in a wreck. All the negative things the pamphlet said about it. And I was just a wreck. And then one of the nurses, because I had pretty much the same nurses, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I told her I read that. She said, "I don't even know why they give it to patients." And she said, "Do you mind if I pray with you?" And she prayed with me and calmed me down.
Yeah.
You know, so like I said, it's not anything I want to repeat. And you know, there are people there who came back and they're going through it again. You know,
Yeah.
and I had a port put in because, and that's where I get my chemo, because the chemo has a tendency to burn your veins. So they didn't want to give it in my wrist so they give you a port that
Yeah.
stays in until after you finished all your treatments. And then when they give you the chemo, they put the needle in that port so they don't have
Oh,
to do your veins.
oh, that's good. You didn't have to
Yeah,
get stuck so many times.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it was an experience. Um, it's interesting. There was a lady in my class at St. Mary's, and she went through breast cancer treatment just about the same time that I did.
Hmm.
And she's a friend on Facebook. And, you know, she still talks about the experience, you know, the anniversaries and all that. And sometimes I just feel like saying to her, let it go. You know, it's like, I don't know. But that's her, you know, I was different, you know,
Mhm.
it's something that happened to me in life, and God saw fit to it. It didn't kill me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't like this bald spot in my hair so much. I used to have nice thick hair,
Yeah.
but you know, I live with that too. It's okay.
Yeah.
But there is even the times when it wasn't malignant, God still used me. I was at my doctor's office once for a follow-up after they did this thing called a needle biopsy in my left breast. They take this needle about yay long and they stick it down in you to get a biopsy.
Oh.
And anyway, so I was at my doctor's office for a follow-up, and this woman was in there just sobbing. And I think she had gotten, you know, a bad report that, you know, it was malignant. So I followed her out of the office, And, I tapped on her shoulder. I said, I kind of feel like you might have gotten a bad report. She said, I did. And she's just crying. And I said, well, I just went through the biopsy, the needle biopsy. And I said, everything's fine with me. And I said, you shouldn't claim that, just think positive that it's going to be okay. And after she had it done, her husband called me and told me that if there was no malignancy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I didn't talk to him after that, but it's just how God can put you in places, and use your experiences to comfort other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. One time, I think the one time I had these things called calcifications in my breast that showed up on the mammogram, and they thought they could become cancerous, so I had to go and have them removed. I was so afraid, Christine, that they were going to say it was cancer. I told them I did not want to be put to sleep.
Oh, wow.
And I'll never do that again because, they numb me, but then they cauterize it. So you can kind of smell your flesh burning and all that. And each time they stick me to re-numb me, I'm like, I ain't never going to do that again.
Yes. No, next time, go to sleep. Doesn't
I know. Oh, yeah. After that, I'm not doing that again. As much as I hate being put to sleep. So it was an experience, but, I have a friend, childhood friend, who has a daughter, and I guess she's in her 50s now, her daughter. This child has had every kind of cancer imaginable.
Wow.
Surgery after surgery after surgery. When she first got sick, she had a boyfriend, and, he left her and all that. But she has, I can't tell you how many surgeries Debbie has had and all the kinds of cancers. And she still fights it. So, mine is nothing.
Yeah.
And I lived. Yeah. One of my neighbors down the street, Cassandra, she developed pancreatic cancer. Oh, wow. And she was 39. She had 3 children. And they had moved from the neighborhood, but I found out about it and I went to visit her. And I felt so bad because she was, in bed and she was just so down and sad. And here I am, twice, not twice her age, but in my 60s or 70s, early 70s at the time, looking like a picture of health, and she's struggling with pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And got to the point where they had an early graduation for one of her children, and she didn't make it, Yeah. She was 39.
Wow.
And here I've seen my children grow up, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So, it was just part of my journey.
So how do you deal with, I want to say grief, but I really mean difficult times in general and moving on from those difficult times? How do you usually deal with those?
Ending my marriage with Skip was really a hard time for me. I went through a real hard time with that, the depression and the crying. I'd cry all the way to work and then get myself together before I got on the parking lot, before I went in. And interestingly enough, I had 2 women who reported to me, and they were both going through something with their husbands.
Okay.
And I'm trying to hold myself together, and one of them would come by and tell her it ain't easy and keep moving. The other white woman, she'd come and stand in my door and give me a whole litany about her husband. And I just felt to myself, you don't get the hell out of my office and let me breathe, But
right.
that was a hard time for me. But prayer, I used to go into prayer every morning, make that 6 o'clock trek. And for 3 years, I just prayed about it before I decided that I was going to end the marriage. And then once I made the decision, and not only that, I'll never forget one night, I'm just tired of crying. And he had stopped sleeping with me and sleeping on the couch and all that. And one night I said, God, I'm tired of crying. I don't want to cry anymore. Take the love I have for him away from me. And after that, I felt totally different toward him. And, that's how I got through it. Death, Ronald's death kind of hit you in the gut because it was so sudden and unexpected.
Yeah.
But, but for older people, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You don't rejoice or anything like that, but it's a different feeling that, because one day it's going to be me.
Yeah.
And you just know it's just a part of life and it's going to happen. And, you just get through it the best you can. As devastating as it can be for, the family and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or if you know people who have suffered for a long time,
Yeah.
death is kind of like welcome. So, I mean, even with my brother, Tim, he was 2 years. It was 2 years this past Monday, I think it was. But, he was on a ventilator. And the thing that I've learned from this coronavirus is that most people on ventilators don't live.
Yeah.
And when he went into the hospital, he was at 4% lung capacity.
Wow.
Yeah, he was on oxygen all the time. And I never thought he was going to survive it. I just, I had just prepared myself for that.
What was your fondest memory of Uncle Tim, speaking of?
Well, the one thing that I did as a result of him, he was very intelligent. He went in the Army, had lots of experiences. He was in Africa for a while, tracking one of the space, I forget which one it was. So he was very intelligent. He went to Johns Hopkins University. And when I saw him going to college, that's what gave me that nudge to go to college.
Okay.
And he was just sharing, his knowledge with me. And so I had good memories at the same time. Whenever he was into some adventure, he wanted everybody to buy into it, and most people weren't even interested in what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he almost wanted to force people to do it, And when it was his time to babysit, like I told you, we had to watch our siblings. Well, he sat up and read all day, and the house be falling down around him. He wouldn't wash dishes. He wouldn't do anything. He read.
Okay.
Yeah. But he was very proud of me, respected me as a minister, and would listen to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's older? Are you older than Uncle Tim?
No, he's 2 years older.
Okay.
He would have been 80 this past June 24th.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So his birthday was June 24th, and he died on June 28th of 2018.
Right. Uncle Tim. Okay. So I have some miscellaneous questions. Give me 1 second. And they're not rapid fire, so don't rush to answer it if you don't have an answer. Answer when you have it.
Okay.
Okay, so give me one word that you would use to describe yourself. Best describe yourself.
Determined.
Determined. Okay. What is your biggest accomplishment?
I think it would be organizing a church, greater
Okay.
faith.
Okay. What was the moment, this is a weird question. What was the moment you knew you were a grown up, an adult?
Hmm. I guess when I had my first child.
Okay. Um, what was, tell me about a time where you cried good tears.
As in tears of joy?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I just think when I think about my family,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Tell me about your favorite memory during a holiday, like Christmas or Easter or
Mm,
Thanksgiving.
wow. Again, just when family dinners,
Okay.
be it Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Oh, a bonus question. Do you have any well, tell me about any good holiday memories with your mom and maybe even your grandma.
No. Well, I'll go back to my grandmother. Her birthday was in December.
Oh, okay.
So for a number of years, Aunt Pooch, her daughter, would
Mhm.
have a birthday party for her
Okay.
at Aunt Pooch's home. And we would all go there. And, we'd always take a card with money because she was up in age. So, and one year, one of the grandchildren, Norman, he said, I'm just going to give you the money because I noticed you weren't reading the cards anyway. So,
Um,
with my mother,
yeah.
Christmas was interesting because we had a room that we called the parlor,
Okay.
Parlor, that we didn't use in the winter because we didn't have central heat.
Okay.
And it was a cold room.
Mhm.
But Christmas Eve, they would go out to the various lots and get trees that were then free because we couldn't
Mhm.
afford them. And they put that tree up in that cold room. And the few gifts that we had would be under the tree. And this was a repeat for a few years. And we just go in there real quick and, grab whatever we got
Mhm.
and come back out to the dining room where we had a stove.
Oh.
Eventually, we did get a stove in that room, but until we did, that Christmas tree usually stayed up till about April, as fresh as it was when we put it up because the room was so cold.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wait, so y'all had a stove in the dining room and then in the
Living
parlor?
room and the kitchen.
What? And y'all
We
cooked
had
on the stove?
we had in the kitchen we had a stove for heat, and we had uh, a stove to cook on, like a gas stove that you have now, not so fancy like the ones
Oh.
now. But yeah, yeah. And then at night you had what they banked those fires. Uh, they put it so that the fire didn't die out, but the embers would stay. And then
Uh-huh.
in the morning they put fresh wood on and stoke it and
Yeah.
stir up the embers and start it all over again.
Oh.
Yeah, a couple of children got burned by them. Oh my God, they would get red hot sometimes. That was
Oh.
yeah, but that's the way we
Who did
lived.
that? Usually your dad did that or
My mother.
your mother? Okay.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay. Tell me about or describe a dream you remember.
Mm. Recently, or
Yeah, yeah, recently. Or maybe even just your most memorable one.
Well, I guess it would have to be when I shared about my mother in the dream,
Okay.
telling me that she loves me.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Tell me one thing you might change about yourself.
Other than my weight.
Oh gosh. But you're small. What are you talking about?
I I would be more assertively ambitious.
Okay.
I mean, there are some things I want to do, but I hold myself back.
Mm,
I mean, just like, doing the Zoom Bible, I thought about it, people ask me to do it, and I'm like, because, there's always new Shiloh in the back of my mind.
mm,
And that's crazy because,
yeah.
God called me to be a minister,
Yep.
and I have to minister, and I wasn't really doing anything in New Shiloh anyway, except sitting on the pew.
Yeah.
So, that, um, I was thinking, but, I had started writing, the play for my book, It's Never Too Late.
Yeah.
And I worked on that some during the first couple of weeks. And so I really want to get back to that.
Yeah.
And so what was your question about?
One thing you would change about yourself.
Yeah. Just executing my dreams.
Okay. All right. Well, Octavia Butler says, "See to it, so be it." She
Mm-hmm.
will write that to herself in like her scribbles, and I end that within my in my diary entries, and it helps me affirm what I want, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of puts some pep in my step about what I know I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
think about
Mm-hmm.
that. So be it.
One of the things, see, I grew up always hearing, first of all, children should be seen and not heard, which I totally disagree. I won't say I totally disagree with it, but for the most part, I disagree with it. And also that you never toot your own horn.
Mm,
And that just kind of stays with you,
yeah.
where other people, they market themselves, they put themselves out there, and, it's difficult for me to do.
Yeah. And you have to. And I think the more you toot your own horn, the more confidence you get in your abilities and your talents and skills.
Mm-hmm.
And the more
Mm-hmm.
other people will believe it too. 'Cause you're like,
Yeah, and then I mean, I had people who are very, complimentary about my skills and what I can do, and they tell me it, but yeah, so that would be the change.
yeah. Um, who is your best friend?
Mm, that would be me.
Okay, that's a good answer. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Wow, if I had a superpower, my superpower, is that like a person or somebody, or?
A superpower like flight, um, being invisible,
Mm,
maybe going from one place to the next in, like a second. I forgot what that's called.
uh-huh.
Super strength.
Mm, wow. Man, that's a tough question. If I had a superpower, what would that be? And perhaps I'm thinking of it in a different light, but if I had a superpower, it would propel me into executing all my dreams.
Okay. Okay. That's a good answer. Okay. If you could live in another country for 6 months, what country
Mm,
would you live in?
wow. I would say another country. For some reason, I always thought if I didn't mind flying, one country that I would visit would be Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
And I always thought that because I should see such beautiful landscapes of Switzerland. It just looks so nice and clean, and the
Mm-hmm.
snow and all of that. And so I think it would be Switzerland. Just looks peaceful. It would feed into my desire to have greater self knowledge of myself.
Okay.
Take me away, give me time to explore that.
Okay. Cool. Mm, who growing up anyway? Who was your favorite singer or group?
Oh, wow. All those papers from the 60s. Wow. Would have to be the Supremes,
Ooh.
Temptations.
Okay. Hmm. What is your what do you think the world will look like 200 years from now?
Ooh,
Or what do you hope for anyway?
what I would hope for would be peace. That we would have finally gotten beyond racism. And it would take that long because you have this generations of white folk who have been taught to hate,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have to die off. And believing that somewhere along the way that another generation would start teaching their children love and not hate. It's like I go back to the Bible when the Israelites were in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they were delivered from Egypt where they were slaves, but there were times when they wanted to go back to Egypt because it was the known versus the unknown. And a lot of them had lost hope and faith that they were really going to go to the promised land that God had for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so those non-believers, God killed off a whole generation of men over 40
Mm-hmm.
because they were non-believers. And they didn't think they were going to make it to the promised land.
Yeah.
When he had told them, I'm going to give you the promised land. Now, he didn't say the journey was going to be easy. You're just going to walk in and take it. But he did say it's yours. You're going to have to fight for it. So when I look at the coronavirus, I don't know if that is just collateral damage because a lot of Black people have died too, or is that a sort of cleansing?
Mm.
It's certainly a lesson that we are not in control of anything,
That is true.
you know?
Yeah.
So we've seen some inroads with racism because of the protests, and George Lloyd, forget his name, but I don't think his death was in vain,
I don't think so either.
not at all, So 200 years. The flip side of that, if we continue as we are, I would hope that God would come back and rapture us all. Jesus would return.
Yeah.
If we continue to go as we're going and get worse,
Mm-hmm.
end it all.
Yeah. I agree. What is one secret you kept from your parents?
The one secret that I kept from them showed up in my pregnancy.
Well, you don't have none. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I never, it's interesting. I mean, I just never had the kind of relationship with my mother that I have with my children or you have with your mother.
Yeah.
There weren't the girly talks or,
Okay.
even when I got my first period, all she said to me was, you can get pregnant now.
Oh,
She
wow.
didn't tell me how you get pregnant or anything.
Wow.
That was the extent of the conversation. You can get pregnant now.
Wow.
You know. And back then you just didn't have this conversation. You never heard the word sex.
Yeah.
When I think of my children now and my grandchildren and the conversations I hear, my mother probably turning over in her grave, okay?
Yeah, my mother's was always very explicit with us. And it made me very uncomfortable. But
And I think it's good to have those conversations. My only, I guess, if I was going to give any advice to my granddaughters and my great granddaughters, if they would ever ask me, is don't have these multi-sexual relationships with men.
okay.
You ain't got to go to bed for every man you date.
Okay.
I'm not saying that you do, but I don't feel like I missed out on anything by only having two sexual partners.
Yeah.
And and definitely no booty calls for a man. If that's all he wants from you,
Yeah.
it's just think more highly of yourself than that.
Okay. Okay. And two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing that you've learned from our conversation today?
I probably talk too much. No, I already knew that. um, I guess one of the things I've learned is I may have told you that the first 3 weeks when I was doing some writing, the first 3 weeks I was in the house, and I started writing about the search for self.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what I've shared today, I had written back there.
Yeah.
It's just so much to write, having lived 77 years.
Yeah.
But I think my children, and this is probably not the answer to your question, but if they were to, when I'm gone, if you all or my children were to read a lot of stuff, I mean, I have writings all over the place. I would probably come across as somebody who just wasn't content.
Mm-hmm.
Because I write so much about the search for self and what am I supposed to be doing and what is my purpose. When I think of all the things that I had done, I spoke at the Civic Center in front of a group of 14,000 people before,
Wow, I didn't know that. See?
Yeah. When I went to New Shiloh, pastor would have like a revival at the Civic Center. And one time during church, I was called to do something. And I shared whatever I shared, I can't remember now. And he said, wow, I like that. He said, when we go to the Civic Center, I want you to give that same little thought. And there's 14,000 people there, I am my own worst critic, but when I think of, where I came from, living in a house with no central air, no running water, no bathroom, and look at where I live now. It's not a palace, but it is to me compared to where I came from. The thing that nobody talked about college in my house, and the fact that, I had the master's, the things that I've done in life that I should have a sense of pride about, instead of like, oh my God, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
So, so maybe that's flowing out of this conversation. And I'm also learning that I see your interest and that you've learned so much more about me than you knew.
Yeah. A whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. It's crazy, but sometimes you think about dying, you be like, oh my God, I hope they remember me after I'm gone,
Oh, girl. Yes.
Then when you think, further along the line, just think there's gonna come a time and nobody down the line will even know, they will maybe know of my existence, depending on how, those after me share the legacy with, succeeding generations.
That's why we're doing this video.
So would have done my hair though, but you're not gonna do the video anyway.
Yeah, we don't have to do the video.
So yeah, so
yeah,
it's a good time for reflection.
Yeah.
Although I do a lot of that anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe too much. As G said, I'm a tortured soul.
Yeah, there is a such thing as too much reflection. Sometimes just be.
Yeah. And I get to that point sometimes, who I am is enough. And I stay there for about 5 seconds and then I'm off. Okay, So, but I think it keeps me going,
Okay.
Yeah.
It keeps you thinking of the next step.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Okay. And my very last question, if you could give any advice to the younger generations, what would it be?
Wow. I would say the first thing would be self-love, to have self-love. Because if you love yourself, you're not going to let other people mistreat you. That would be the first thing. I would also say be a lifetime learner.
Okay.
There's always something new to learn. And just be about love, especially your family. That's when you get right down to it, even though families can be dysfunctional and they have their issues. I mean, take our family. This is who we are. This is all we got,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it.
Yeah.
Family is so important.
Thank you so much for tuning into the premiere episode of Bio and Audio. I hope you all enjoy listening to Doris' story. Follow us at Bio and Audio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates. Until next time.